Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dr. Music Podcast. Thank you to my subscribers. You give me the opportunity to bring great guests to the show, and like the one I have today, Torsten Kinsella. Torsten is the guitarist, vocalist, and keyboardist for God Is An Astronaut, hailing from County Wicklow, Ireland. God Is An Astronaut began their journey in 2002. Since their inception, the band has put out 10 albums, really productive band, and they are all set to release their 11th. The new record's called Embers. It comes out September 6th on Napalm Records. Torsten, it's great to have you, man.
So it's a pleasure to be here, Scott. And as I was saying, we're excited for the new album. It's gone down well so far. We've got two singles out, Falling Leaves and Embers, and we've Odyssey, which is the next one coming up, I think about 2 days before the release. So we're kind of excited, and we've played all these songs live in the last couple of shows that we did. We did a couple of festivals in Europe, and a real positive reaction to all the new stuff.
That's great. And you mentioned Odyssey, and if I have a favorite on the record, that might be it. It's just such a great song. And you mentioned playing this live, and I listened to this record, and it's complex. It's by nature, by definition, it is progressive music. It transcends the boundaries of the verse, chorus, verse standard structure. Playing this live would seem like a difficult task. Describe your music. I've tried to. I listened to God As An Astronaut, and I try to get a description for somebody who asks me, how would you describe your music and what you do?
The best way I would describe it is emotionally rather than stylistically. All the music that we write is essentially about the experiences that we have gone through in life. And I find it very difficult to write music if there isn't something bothering me or something that I need to get off my chest. It's very hard for me to write music that you just get in and have some fun someday and just write some riffs and stuff like that. Usually that stuff doesn't really make the end product. So
Right.
a lot of the music that we write is essentially a cathartic experience. It's stuff that means a lot to us. And on this record, it's again possibly probably the darkest period of our lives. My father, on November 28th, we had earlier that morning we had some lunch with him. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he went outside in the back garden, and he dropped dead.
Oh,
Heart
so
attack.
sorry.
And we tried to revive him, but I just couldn't. And my brother Niels was there that day as well, and two of us got to work, and my mother was there, my wife was there, and there's nothing we could have done. And it just, for me, I was able, I guess, to write some music straight after it. I wrote Falling Leaves, which was about the experience that I went through that day, which was essentially, it's so surreal because, obviously I knew a day would come where my father would pass away, but never did I imagine it could be like that, where he's as healthy as you and I are talking, just absolutely having a normal conversation. And he was looking forward to going on tour with us to Turkey and India and all this stuff that, he'd travel a lot with us, do the merchandise and keep busy.
Right.
And he was really looking forward he just done Christmas shopping earlier that morning with my mum. And we had a great lunch. And he said, guys go back down, get some stuff done. And he looked good that day. And so it's unimaginable. My wife coming in screaming into the studio saying, listen, your dad he's collapsed on the ground outside. And I remember just trying to ring the emergency services. It just took forever. And I remember nearly fainting, and just everything went in slow motion, just seeing him there. And a kind of a calm came over me at some point where it said to me, maybe this isn't the worst thing. Maybe this is the way, a good way to go, in your own garden, not in a hospital or a hospice. And a flood of different emotions came over, and leaves falling. He was trying to sweep them up or clean them up, whatever he was trying to do at that time of the afternoon. And I picked up his acoustic guitar, which is sitting to the left of me here. I might just show it to you actually.
Yeah, please.
It's 1972, I think, frameless acoustic guitar, and it's so battered and worn you can barely play anything on it. I since actually got it done up from that day, but I sat down and I wrote Falling Leaves. Now this is not the kind of guitar you can go up the neck here. It gets very hard to play, so you have to kind of come up with stuff that works to the first 12 minutes, maybe, maybe you get 15 on it, but that's about it. And I wrote Falling Leaves, and that kind of captured for me all the different emotions that I went through, sadness, but also an overwhelming sense of gratitude to him and everything that he did for us. There would be no God Is An Astronaut without my father. When I look back at it now, it's clear that God Is An Astronaut always was Niels, myself, Lloyd, and my father, Thomas. We'd always work together as a team to even in the early days, my dad actually would do all the driving on tour for us. And he was involved in the music business back in the 60s. He was in a psychedelic rock band called the Orange Machine, and he was a bass player. And he taught us how to play our instruments, and he took a huge active interest in all the different writings and everything that I did. And he heard some of the stuff that's on this album, but it all took a kind of a twist at the end because he had so many ideas, my dad, and usually I dismissed them. He'd say things like, why not try and put some sitar on this? I said, Tommy, sitar, it's a bit of a far-fetched instrument for me to, go and source someone for that. I knew one guy, but I hadn't talked to him in years. And I said, no, look, it probably won't make any difference. And he was talking about slide guitar. He was a big fan of slide. And I was like, it's not quite my forte, but, I'll take it on board. But when he passed away, I felt I had to honor every one of his ideas. And the first thing I did is I traced down Dara in Cork, and he's the only sitar player I know, and a fantastic one at that. And I told him the story, and he says, well, I tell you what, send me all the material down, not just one. I want to be involved in every part of the record. And he says, I can really relate to the story of your dad, and I want to be involved in this. And I sent every one of the songs, and Falling Leaves, obviously the first one that he wanted to do. And I know my father would have been proud of that song. It would have had all the ingredients that he would have liked. And I even dug out some of his old fuzz pedals from the 70s to try and give a bit of a kind of a tribute to his band, the Orange Machine. And I got a loan of I since bought it actually, a 1963 Vox AC30 amp. And I just copied. Robin was the guitarist of that band, and I copied, pretty much the way he would have gotten his sound. And
Right.
I incorporated that. It was almost like bridging the past to the present for me, to really give it a special, just a special kind of tribute to my father. And at the funeral, the singer from the Orange Machine, Ernie, was there, and I told him a little bit about it, and he had to come down to the studio while he was here, and he's from Seattle, and he had a listen. He said, man, he said, you really nailed that sound. That's the one that we used to have. So I kind of found myself traveling back in time and maybe getting some retro guitar sounds, and I used my 1969 Marshall, and I just really started using some old microphones and really just trying to get that kind of vintage tone, I guess, with the distortions and the ram's head big muff and all that kind of sound. I just found myself just immersed in that world. And the second song that I wrote was Odyssey, which was written 2 days after my father passed away. And that was a strange one because it kept on morphing and moving into totally different directions, and at the end of it was just like this piece that started here and ended up in a totally different sphere. And again, I started that song on this acoustic guitar. It was written, the first parts were written on it. And it was one thing my father always used to say to me, because he used to always hear me writing especially in the early days, he'd hear me writing on the acoustic guitar. He said, well, why do you always throw it onto the electric? Why can't we leave some of it onto the acoustic? I said, it doesn't really suit what we're doing. Let's just, I don't want to get too traditional with the stuff. But again, I said to myself, my dad would have wanted me to keep it on the acoustic, and I guess now there's a kind of a slight Eastern traditional influence between the acoustic guitars and the sitars, and of course Joe Quayle, who added some cello to the whole record, I should say, and she did some fantastic stuff. And Dara added some more different kind of weird kind of percussion instruments throughout the record, and temperas and all the different things.
Right.
I just think I knew my father. He loved the Beatles, and he would love the Ravi Shankar stuff. So I know this would have been something that he would have been very excited about.
Man.
And it's just too bad he didn't get to hear it. But again, some of these songs never would have been written, only for what had happened.
Yeah.
So it's kind of left me in a place where, it's very difficult for me. I was very close to my father. He wasn't just my father. He was really a person that I talked to on, nearly every day. And I kind of feel a little bit lost without him. But at the same time, I feel I have to move forward and honor what he would have wished for and what he would have wanted. And I think that's kind of where my mindset is at the moment. But it's not easy. I'm sure everybody, at some point in their life will go through, if they haven't already, something like that. And it makes you question reality almost. It's like you think what we're experiencing right now is essentially your life the way it's going to be, but it can change at the blink of an eye. And I guess Embers to me encapsulates that feeling. It's kind of try to appreciate what you have, because one day you won't have it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that is a tough way to lose somebody. And I'm so sorry. That is really difficult, but at the same time, a great inspiration for your music. It's with that story. This Embers record is even more special. It comes from that sorrow, and that has real power to it. This record is a powerful record. It's a lot of emotion going on in the record. You can feel that. But with those instruments, I think about the sitar and the distinct sound of it, and incorporate it into what you do. Let's shamanic drums. North a Native American instrument. The sitar being Indian, and you have some zither on this record. The bowed psaltery, more German ancestry there. It's you could almost call it world music. It's you have people come in to play those. Did you try your hand at these instruments? How did that work, bringing in those instruments?
Well, initially with the sitar, obviously, I'm saying to myself, if I'm going to send if I want him to put some sitar lines down on this, do I try to program some stuff using kind of native instruments? And I had a few kind of hook lines that I thought were good, and I sent, I'd say maybe 20% of what ended up being on the record, but Dara wrote a lot of pieces that I didn't write. He kind of come up with a lot of cool counter melodies. The way he worked was he nearly came up with 6 hours, 7 hours of stuff over each of the songs, and I had to kind of sift through it painstakingly, hoping that I got all the best stuff. And I think that's how most of it worked out. I think for certain tracks, Apparition, for example, I had written the sitar lines, and then he improvised over the heavy part and came up with this kind of, if you listen to it over the heavy riff, there's a kind of him playing a kind of a harmony part over it in a very I would say percussive way. So I definitely had written some of the hook lines, but I have to give Dara most of the credit. He really just put a lot of work in, and I was just so surprised the amount of stuff that he came up with. Joe, the same. I mean, Joe on cello did a lot of this. With Joe, you just send the stuff, and you just don't have to say anything. And every time she sends the stuff back, it's like, how does she just read my mind? She just knows exactly what to do over her stuff. She has that really cool ability just to understand where to put it in and where not to put it in. I had to do very little for Joe. I think with Joe, it's just you just drag and drop it in, and she just nailed nearly everything. And there was even a song I had accidentally sent that I wasn't going to put on the record, but when she sent it back to me, I said to myself, "My God, I think I'm gonna have to include this." And that was Prism.
Okay.
I forgot. I was going to tell her no. We probably have one too many of those ambient songs, but I just played. I played it to Neil. So he said, "Okay, that's really good. We're going to have to leave that in." And I felt like I needed to kind of say feat Joe Quayle on that because without her involvement, I probably wouldn't have included that piece of music. I just think she really turned it into something extra special.
Wow.
And I think with all the other instruments, obviously the guitars and stuff like that, I would have written them over a period of time. Drums, I worked with Lloyd quite closely. Sometimes what we did there, we'd maybe program the drums first before he plays it live, because some of the timings, I don't know if this is, Lloyd thinks it's a pain in the ass. I find it very hard to play in normal timing. Everything I do seems to always veer off. Like example, Embers is one of those things where some of the counts on that were crazy. It was something like Lloyd said one of them was like 33 and a quarter count. So he said, look, we need to sit down and see if we can actually figure this out, and we programmed the pattern in, and he was saying, look, for record we could leave it like this, but live there's no chance we're leaving it like this. Some of the timings, he said, they're insane. He says, but I said I wanted to leave it like that because it just had this cool tension to it in places. And even Falling Leaves, I didn't realize some of that is completely odd timing and drop counts here and there, so Lloyd took a while to really sit down and say, okay, let's just figure this out. Neil's kind of worked, obviously, we kind of worked, I'd say 3 times a week. He'd come down and, I'd have a few bass ideas, but he'd kind of always change them to what he...
Well, it's that kind of thing where, with playing live, like I was saying, your music does that. It's extremely progressive in that way to where it's not the norm, and it goes in different directions, and, it is complex, and the time signatures are different, and, that's difficult to reproduce. In the live setting, I mean, you have to be well rehearsed, right?
Yeah, we did an insane amount of rehearsal.
Yeah.
When we played Embers for the first time, I remember Lloyd just stopping halfway through. He says, I don't think I can do this. This is just, I said, how the hell am I supposed to get from this pattern into a blast beat? He said, it's just, oh God. So but we could have stuck with it, and it ends up being one of the, actually, I think it is the best live track that we have ever now. And it's when people hear it being played live, it's like, as you say, it's a huge journey. Which is a stark contrast from where we began. I mean, the first album, it's a lot more, I guess, a basic structure. I don't say it was verse, chorus, verse, or anything like that, but it's certainly much more simplistic. Right. Where with this one, and I don't know, it's not like we purposely set out to do like let's make this really intricate. It's just the way that the music for us makes sense. For example, if I hear like a line and then it comes back 2 minutes later again, it's these days that kind of bores me a little bit. I like the idea of our music almost like a film, or like where there's a start and a middle and an ending, and they're not necessarily repeating. It's a continuation, but it starts from one point and ends in a totally different point. To me, that's more interesting than what I hear some groups do, where it's kind of maybe 30 seconds or a minute of material that gets looped around and built up. I find that quite uninspiring, and I feel like I have more to say than just that. I feel like, especially for example, what happened to my father that day is that there was a flood of emotion of gratitude all the way to sorrow, and I think I felt I had to, and even at the end, the whole end piece to me represents him hopefully traveling into the cosmos. That whole end music piece represents his essentially him departing into hopefully a better place. And so there was so much different emotions that I felt that I had to capture, and it kind of makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to others. But, yeah, well,
do you think the lack of vocals, lyric vocals, it helps you to expand on the musical structure?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously with vocals, I think you need a little bit more discipline, you know,
Right.
in the sense that, you know, it'd be very difficult for someone to write vocals. I mean, it's hard enough getting one or two good vocal hooks. Imagine trying to come up with six or seven of them, you know, and they
Right.
never. I think what usually happens with you know, in a vocal song, you'd get a chorus that sounds great. You have to repeat it, you know, you
Right.
know, that's the selling point. Um, for us, we'll just repeat it, I guess, for a while until we move on to the next section. Um, I think it'd be quite difficult to do that and get enough lyrics as well. I could imagine that being very challenging over our stuff. I don't know if it's possible. I'm sure somebody could do it. It certainly wouldn't be me anyway. But
Have you ever thought, you know, in the history of the band, you got 22 years, have you ever thought about doing a vocal track?
I mean, I used to do vocals in '90s rock band when I was, you know, I was playing the '90s, and my vocals were always kind of substandard tonally. I thought I never felt that it kind of it never captured what was quiet in my mind. I'd always feel to, do you know, if I'm singing quiet, I'm thinking that's going to be really good, and then when I eventually belt it out loud, it used to kind of just sour everything that I had in my mind. So it was really through a process of elimination that we ended up with instrumental music. Do I think we could add some vocals? Yeah, I do, but I think we'd have to work with a vocalist that I think would have a certain sound and voice that would not necessarily dominate it too much, but it would, you know, but it would sit in there almost like an instrument.
Right.
Uh, Lyrically, I'd probably need a little bit of help. I won't lie. But I would have. So I could do it. I'd probably do it as an EP, you know, rather than as an album, just in case it didn't work out too good. Uh, it's a different skill set, and I, you know, a lot of the music that I listen to, are, you know, obviously would have vocals in it, and but for us, I think instrumental music is, for me, it just feels more a more natural way to express ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and you do it well. You do it well, my friend. Um, the writing process, has it changed over the years? And how do you know, are you all in one room? You know, does somebody bring in an idea, a riff? You know, I noticed, you know, like in a regular song, a regular band, a riff comes in, and then, you know, they work it out and write lyrics over it. That's not a process that, you know, would be suitable for you without lyrics. Yeah, how does it work? How does the writing process work for you guys?
I guess is that we've over the years we've acquired a few different ways, different techniques of coming up with stuff. In the very very start, way we would have written would have been this is before we had any multi-track recording system. We only had an Akai sampler and a sequencer, and it was a
Wow.
Yamaha Tour desk. I remember a lot of that stuff. We came up with drum loops and we'd program them out, and then I'd maybe use one of my old synths here that I had back in the day, and just, you know, come up with. Obviously, I had to sequence it with, I think it was with a Roland XB80, so everything was done with a sequencer, and then we would put small bits of performance of loops down on our Akai sampler. It used to be quite difficult to, I remember, get the timing right, because we had to, you couldn't, you actually had to play the line in your head, and then hopefully that it would line up, because we didn't have the necessary equipment. But that's how the end beginning came around. It was a lot of kind of I guess loops and piano lines that we wrote. The influences on that record, I remember thinking, it was from the Moody Blues all the way to Massive Attack. We were kind of thinking
Yeah.
that kind of way. It was with All's Vine, All's Bright. That was essentially, I guess, the record that kind of brought us to the next level. That was kind of just a natural progression from what we were doing live. We just realized playing piano live, it's not really doing as much as guitars. You know, guitars seem to kind of capture people's. I got them more into the music, so we started to write more stuff with guitars as the lead instrument, and my father helped at the time, help us get Pro Tools and stuff like that, and we were able to record full on performances. And Lloyd joined the band just before we record the album, and we were able to, for the first time ever, record full on proper live drums. And it was a natural progression, but a lot of that material I remember back then was actually written, actually funny enough, on this acoustic as well. I had written a lot of all his vines. Niels would come up with these bass arpeggio. He'd stick a capo up like the 12th fret on the bass. Really awkward like his 12-string capo and tried to come up with these arpeggio lines. We did one or two of them on the end of the beginning, and I think between us, we obviously me focusing more on the guitar, him more on the bass, we kind of come up with some songs like All's Fine, All's Bright and Fragile. And Forever Lost was written on the piano. And I think that kind of method is kind of stuck with us. Over the years, I might have extended it to a point where I might come up with like a load of weird guitar effects pedals and come up with weird sounds, and almost like a sculpturing technique where you throw a load of weird tones and sounds down, and from that you start to see if there's any hidden melodies in what you've done and pull them out. So we've done that technique. But on this record, I would say that a lot of it again was written primarily maybe me starting it off on an acoustic guitar, or Neil's writing in a bass arpeggio line, or me kind of sitting down and playing a piano piece, and always with the intent that I had something that I wanted to convey. Though I don't think any of the songs that I wrote where I had nothing really in my mind and I'll just start jamming. None of that stuff really makes it. Usually what happens with those songs, they're like overly complicated riffs that just don't end up doing anything for me. So a lot of the stuff, every one of the pieces of music that made it are all essentially, I guess influenced by probably the loss of my father, but also we lost my uncle as well in Germany. He passed away through cancer, and one or two of those songs was written about him as well, and just my experiences sitting in the room of where he was cremated, and it was just a really eerie feeling. And one of the ambient songs is about that. So sometimes what I would do, if I'm doing a more ambient piece, I could write a piano line, for example, and then I would slow it down to maybe say it was written in 120 beats per minute. I'd slow it down to maybe 40 beats per minute.
Wow.
And then I would kind of put it through filters and reverbs and some old tape echo machines and start to create kind of an atmosphere. And then from there, maybe try to bring out some of the hooks with other instruments and subtly just bring it forward. So a lot of it, I guess, is studio written, maybe, or written in your own environment. One or two of them would have obviously came together as a band, where I obviously had something to start it off with, and then we'd start to morph it and start to bring it forward. What I did do though with the songs where there was drums, we did jam all those songs in the rehearsal area before we recorded it, because you do learn stuff from that process. Sometimes it's almost a fear. You've written a lot of stuff and then you go to try and play it live and it's saying this is terrible, this is not going to work at all. So we did do that with Embers and a couple of the different things, and just to try and figure out are the tempos correct and stuff like that. So it's a hybrid, I guess, between writing in your own environment and then bringing it to the band and then back into a recording situation.
Well, that's it, and that's where the chemistry of the band happens. I think we get everybody. This is a band, truly. You, you mentioned being that ambient sound and creating an atmosphere, and that happens in your music. And you speak of the dark time with Embers. There's a lot of darkness. But I don't, when I'm listening to it, you definitely feel that darkness. But there's a certain light to this. There's a finality, end of the tunnel brightness to the record as well. I get that feeling. It all good things, in the end, which is really inspiring. It's a wonderful record. It's a wonderful journey. I think about the names of the songs, and Falling Leaves obviously would, you've told that, but throughout the years, with naming the songs, when you don't have lyrics, is that a process? Have you ever changed the way you've done it, where you had a name for a song and wrote music to it, or do you write the music and then give the sound and the atmosphere a name?
usually how it would work is I'd write something, and I know I'd have something on my chest, and if I was ever unsure, I'd ask my father to come down. So what kind of feelings are you getting off this? I just started this idea,
Right.
and we'd figure out roughly the kind of the emotion of the song and what it's trying to say, and I would come up with a working title. Sometimes it was just so obvious to me what this is about, and I'd come up with it may not be the end title, but it would be something that really just, in my opinion, is exactly what the emotion is about. Niels would usually kind of come in at the end process where he'd say, look, I'd prefer to keep it a little bit more cryptic than what you're doing, because it's just not allowing anybody else to kind of put their own interpretation on it. Can we come up with a title that doesn't necessarily lead people down to like to a kind of like this is about death or doom or whatever? Can we because Neil says there is hope there, and somebody else might see this in a totally different light. So he'd come in, and he was always quite concerned about the titles. He didn't like the long titles that I'd usually come up with, so he'd shorten them down a bit. He was kind of more focused on the marketing end of things. He's saying, God is an astronaut, and then you have this really long song title. It's starting to look like a poem or something. Let's just keep this more to the point. So he'd come in and keep things more kind of cryptic. I'm trying to think now of some of the titles even escaping me at the moment. I'd have to have a look at my phone here, even on the new album, and just to tell you maybe some of
how it started.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to see if I can just kind of.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I have them in front of me now. So I remember Embers was originally called Shroud. That was the original title for that one, because it was inspired by my uncle, a German who died from leukemia, and it was just, he really died in a very tough way, and I that whole it was kind of a sense of dread and morbidness to it, but Neil said we don't really want to end up with Shroud. It's just we just did that album Epitaph a while back, and we kind of it was right on the nose of. There's no way anybody else could interpret that as anything different but from what it was. So this is Embers, kind of, to me, you can link to it in the sense that it's, there's a cremation or whatever, but it's also, it disperses into the heavens, and there's a bit of brightness with Embers. So Niels wanted to make sure there was a little bit of brightness in there. And the other songs that I had, Realms, to me, that was essentially a burial, and I had this kind of, again, it's just like a misty fog on a lake with a boat on fire. That was kind of what that feeling of that whole piece of music. It's almost like a Viking ship kind of coming through the fjord with a load of kind of, you can barely see it, and it's on fire with a funeral kind of pyre. So, but that was kind of, I just had written down funeral pyre or whatever, but so we kind of changed things a little bit to kind of, I guess, brighten the mood just up a little bit. And then we had Hourglass. I remember that one. We had a different working title for that one as well. And again, it was I can't remember exactly what it was, but it essentially was quite a very dark, like death, essentially. You know what I mean? Because the whole piece at the end, when you listen to when the song finishes out, there's a kind of a noise, and then it switches off. That's essentially person,
The last breath
gone. So I kept that in, but Niels is saying maybe Hourglass might be, kind of a little bit less severe than the other title. So we were kind of looking at things that way. And as Neil's saying, we don't want an Epitaph Part 2 here, because that's going to be too much for people to take. And I think he was right about that. And he also said there is also happiness in this album as well. He said that there's moments where it makes you feel euphoric. And I don't want the titles to kind of take that away from the music. So I probably credit Niels mostly for the song titles, and been really kind of worried about what people might perceive them to be, so
yeah.
but that's kind of it. And Odyssey, I think he came up with as well, because he said that's just a journey, isn't it? If it just goes from here to here to here to here to here.
Yep.
Uh, I can't remember the original title, but I'd written that one 2 days after my father passed away, and but it had all the different. I remember writing, I think I'm going to have to somehow get into a sitar piece, like a hook line, and I wrote that piece as well, and that was very much influenced by my father's band, the Orange Machine, to try and come up with a kind of a hook line that would suit that, and it was just really a tribute to him, and I guess psychedelic rock of sorts, influences thrown in there, which I wouldn't have normally done, but my father loved that music, he really did.
It is a great record. There's so much to love here. It really, really is. And I love, one thing that really stood out to me in listening to the record, the transition from Odyssey to Heart of Roots is a stark difference when one ends and one begins. And that's really it woke me up. I was listening to the record as I was doing some work, and that happened. And I said, whoa. I stopped what I was doing, went back, looked at the song titles, and really just stopped and listened to the tracks together. And it's really, really beautiful, the way that it works together. Sequencing, something I really look at. And I guess it's my age too. I listened to records when I was coming up. We put a record on and took that journey. Sequencing had a lot to do with the journey you went on. Do you put a lot of time into the sequencing of these songs?
Yeah, to me, especially these days where people say the album is dead, I
Right.
would be one of those people that kind of still flies that old flag of the album. And we were exposed to so much music back in the day. My dad would play a lot of Pink Floyd and all the different stuff, and
Right.
we were kind of like grew up to value the album, and to us that's musically what inspires us still is just to have different feelings and different stuff coming together. And so we'd spend a lot of time just to make sure that this has a good listening experience, even though some people will tell us they're probably only going to listen to this song and then that song and then this and then go. I still We still make the record for the people who don't think that way. We want to appeal to the people who want to sit down, maybe even buy the vinyl and just sit down and listen to the whole story. And that's why it's always difficult for us when they ask us to come up with a single or two, because it's kind of meant to be listened as, as one piece,
Right.
And that always puts me off when we do that, because we're saying to the record label, can we not just put it all out together at one go, But I said, no, 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 we definitely cannot do that.
Well,
So
you mentioned Odyssey being the single, and I think to myself, oh man, people are not going to hear that transition because it's just the one song. They're not going to hear the transition when Odyssey ends and Heart of Roots begins. That is something that's really makes it all work for me. So it's that way of thinking. Yeah.
yeah, for me now, I hate to say it, if we were on our own label, I would have just put it out all together as one with no singles.
Hey,
Wouldn't make sense to me. But I know, Napalm Records are probably much more experienced than we have in the marketing end of things. So maybe they're probably right. But I can't, it's just that old musical heritage that makes me want to put it all together as one. Because I feel that, you know, I was nearly thinking of crossfading this, so it would have been impossible for them to be able to. But we listened to, I guess, what they had to say. So, but yeah, I maybe in the future, if we're on our own label again, we probably will just put them all out as one. I'm not bothered with the whole idea of singles, because I don't think we're really a single band anyway. I think it's more of an album listening experience, maybe an EP or something like that as the shortest. But singles, yeah, that never really did much for me personally. I like to see the complete story,
Yeah,
and make an
yeah.
assessment.
Yeah, and it definitely is a singles world out there. I mean, people are putting out one song at a time these days, and it's a thing. So you kind of, you have to do it. But yes, I would completely agree. You have to listen to this record especially from beginning to end. It's a beautiful journey, and it goes to so many different places and so many different emotions. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. How do you measure success for the band? I mean, there are bands out there that they just want to make a living doing what they love to do, and they're happy. I think about Kurt Cobain in Nirvana, and I don't think he wanted to be the flavor of the day. He didn't want to fill, 200,000 people of people that really just know the one song. He liked the smaller, uh, rabid fan base that he had. And I think you guys have that. You have people that love your music, like adore it and have to have it and really are absorbed by it. And that is a beautiful thing. So, when you measure success for the band, do you have a large goal that you're reaching for, or, is there, are you content with the way it is now?
I'd say essentially we're content with the way it is. We have no aspirations to become a huge stadium size band, and I don't think the music without vocals anyway has really much more potential to kind of get much bigger. I'm sure if you got a film or a soundtrack or something, maybe you could double the size of the group. Maybe if something different things were to happen, but for me, it's not really important. I don't like fame. I don't like attention. I tend to me, do you know what the most important thing to me? To me is to be able to get by financially and doing what we love to do. I don't. When maybe when we started as kids, we were thinking, we get up and, back when music was being played on the television with MTV or something, you'd think, oh, we're going to be one of these big rock bands or whatever. But
Right.
as time progressed, I find myself not wanting to ever go near something like that. I just all the different stuff that comes with it, and you could see what happened to Kurt Cobain and all the different pressures, and it'd be very difficult to, I think, do what you love to do in the first place, which is write music and create stuff. There's enough distractions even at my level, different people coming in and phone calls, but you can imagine at that level where you've got maybe somebody trying to sue you for breach of copyright
Yeah.
or something to that. I would not want that. And I don't have any aspirations, for example, to play in Glastonbury or any of that stuff. It's of no interest to me. If it happens, it happens, but I'm not looking for it. And to me, as long as we can financially get by and do what we love to do and just go on our own journey, we don't need to be the center of attention. We're very happy just to be doing what we do in our world. And if it gets bigger, not too much bigger, we'll probably be still happy enough. I definitely don't want it to be where you're doing tons and tons of interviews every day and dealing with publishers and A&R men, and I'm happy enough to kind of keep it in our world where I get up in the morning, I do a small bit of exercise, and I get into the studio and just worry about the stuff that's really important, your family and your health and your well-being, and write music that captures something in your heart. And I'd be definitely happy if it just stayed nearly as it is.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because as a fan, I love that too. I love to have my band, and everybody that I know that likes the band knows the band. Not just once, oh, I like that song. And that's great when that you get that success, but they don't really know the band, yeah, and it's very shallow. Where you have some people that like God as an Astronaut, like everything. They love what you're doing. There is a devotion there, and that's a beautiful thing. It really is. Um, d- we've talked about playing live. We talked about what you do in the studio and how complex that is. Um, what do you prefer one over the other? Do you like to play live? You got to love the studio because you can do so much with what you do. But playing live, do you like to bring it live?
It sometimes it depends. I definitely prefer solitary and working on material. I found it like even on the last tour that we went out, I felt kind of unprepared for all the people. I found myself thinking, God, this is really strange. All the stuff that we'd written, in our own little solitary world is suddenly we're in front of all these people now, and I found it hard to adapt for a while. I start to adapt after a couple of shows, and I do, once I get the hang of it again, live is kind of fun. But there's a lot of stuff is not fun about live. Is the touring, the traveling from A to B with very little sleep, and you kind of, it's one of those things where you it's a love hate thing where when you don't tour for a while you miss it and you want to get out, but when you're out there for a while you're thinking, when can I get home again? So it's a really weird thing, but I do put a lot of work into the live shows to make sure that they're equal to the records, and we spend a lot of time on, probably too much time, getting the sounds right on sound check. And on this occasion we had a couple of festivals, and there is no sound checks. I mean, you're essentially told, get your equipment out of the van and roll onto stage and play. And I remember thinking to myself, this is really stressful, and this is like I remember this was in Brutal Assault, which is in front of a very heavy metal audience, I guess, in Czech Republic, and it's a very respected festival. And I remember thinking to myself, no one's quite even going to watch us here because they've got Exodus or something, one of the big thrash metal bands over in the main stage. But I was wrong. It was like thousands of people there to see us. I was thinking, oh Christ, now the pressure. And all I was worried at the start was, can I make this? There's a really hard chord on the on Odyssey. I hope I can make the chord. It's like it stretches over like that, and it's like, oh God, this is really tough. I hope I get this. I got it, and that was kind of thoughts that go through your head. And when the gig is over, you're kind of relieved that it went down as well as it did, and I get more fun actually listening back later. Our sound engineer would record the show, and I said, "Oh, gee, that sounds really good." And but while we're playing, to me, it's a weird feeling because you're not. It's not that kind of band where you're playing to the audience. It's a kind of music you're playing. I find, to be honest with it, you've kind of got to transport yourself back to the meaning of the music in the first place.
Right.
And sometimes that can be quite depressing because you're playing Falling Leaves, and I'm thinking to myself, I remember writing this about my father literally, the next day after he died, and that's all flooding through my mind as I'm playing the music. And so to me, it's when it's working right, the audience isn't there. It's just you and the music, and I think that might not work for a lot of music where you need interaction, you need the charismatic frontman. But that just doesn't work for our music. For us, it has to. You have to really believe in the music and the melodies, and trust the band. Niels and Lloyd, we're a three-piece, which is what we're most happiest with because three of us are on the exact same wavelength. But now that we're a three-piece, I've had to add a lot more guitar pedals, loop pedals, and God, is it ever complicated? And I'm stuff, and I'm thinking, did I get that 100% in time? I hope that I did, and then I'm changing pickups. I literally can't even get a drink of water during our shows.
Right.
I'm tense. Like the pedal board I have here is nearly like 50 pedals, and they're all saying to me, like, do you need all that? And I go through it, and every time I say, you actually need every one of them to actually do it exactly the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of take a lot of pride in the live thing, but to me, it's kind of a love-hate thing. It's hard to explain.
Yes, I can see that. The anxiety of it to get it right the way you want it is a really complex, difficult thing, and it's tiresome.
And then you see like certain groups, maybe they playing before you, they're getting the whole audience jumping up and down. And I have to go back to what my father said to me: your music doesn't do that, so don't even worry about that stuff. Your music isn't there to get people jumping around and creating a mosh pit. You have to accept that and just play the music because your music is the where you'll stand. Some people is telling me what you say. They'll close their eyes, they'll take it in, they'll listen to the melodies. There's plenty of power there for sure, but it's not kind of a jump around experience.
Yeah.
It's a take it in experience. So I've gotten more comfortable with that, and not let any other groups or any other music or audience change my goals when we play live. And it was funny because on this tour we did a load of metal festivals, and then we did the Ziggit Festival, which is this like more alternative indie pop festival, and I just think this is a totally different feeling. With the metal audience, they're kind of, you got to bring it to them to a certain degree, and there's plenty of power that we have,
Right.
And then pop festival, you kind of worry maybe you don't want to go too far with them, because they're
Yeah,
going
it's
to
interesting.
have their ears back, But one thing I said to myself, I got to block all that out and just do what we do, and not adapt to any environment. It make the environment yours. And there was one actually I really enjoyed, which is we played this metal festival in Romania, and I was feeling awkward about it all day, And when we started, the heavens opened. It started to absolutely downpour with torrential rain.
Wow.
And I said to myself, this is perfect because most of the music I write is kind of in this environment.
Right.
It really worked. And I just remember feeling it. It's kind of like, my hairs on my back was standing. And this is perfect. The music is just totally suited to this environment. And the reviews really came back saying that they got it. The music just suited
Yep.
the.
See,
And
and yeah, people will get it, and you can feel it. I remember I saw Pink Floyd on the Animals tour when I was 8 years old. Now, I was, I was very aware of what I was seeing. I knew the music, and I was a big listener at that age. And I actually, I knew what I was looking at. But there was a feeling, because I listened to all the other stuff too, the Aerosmiths that were, in your face and sing along and rah rah rah. And then you got to Pink Floyd. And as an 8 year old, I was advanced in musically as an 8 year old. I could appreciate both of those. But seeing them live was a whole different thing. And it's what we're talking about is there was none of that. It was them up there. They were playing to themselves, really, and creating this kind of sound and atmosphere. And I remember getting lost in that, as an 8 year old standing there, and it was outdoors in a big stadium, and I'm looking around, and it was that atmosphere. They created an atmosphere that I'll never forget. It had a huge impact on me without being in my face, So that's kind of what you guys do, is create this atmosphere, and the rain had to be
it
just
was
incredible.
it was even lightning and stuff at times, and
Wow.
it was a really cool experience. And but I would have loved to see Pink Floyd back then. I mean, obviously, the Live at Pompeii thing
Yeah,
just blew me every time. I love that kind of music, and my father loved that kind of music. And we did like other kinds of stuff like AC/DC, and you get that kind of
yeah,
straight rock and roll show. That's cool too,
right,
But
right.
but for us, I think it's probably in the sphere of Pink Floyd, and the environment, and I love that because it's almost like you don't get everything in the first 30 seconds. I mean, you've got to sit there for maybe 50
Yep.
minutes before you get the whole picture. With a rock show, I think, you got to start off bang, and we don't do that. The first song we started off with was Odyssey, because you can imagine at the metal festival, they've been hearing stoner rock and the heaviest of stuff. And I started with this on my Jaguar, like an arpeggio guitar. I was thinking, I don't know what people are going to, but you have to say to yourself, it doesn't matter. Just create the environment, reel them in. And the funny thing is, nobody walked away. He was pulling them in bit by bit, and
Yep.
I and that was kind of something that I know my father was always trying to instill in me. Just believe in the music, stand your ground, don't jump around, don't do any of that stuff. You got enough to do to play it well,
Yep.
and chemistry between the band. That's what you've got to be working on, and I guess we've done that. So I love the live performances end of it at the end. I really do like playing with the guys. There's great chemistry with them, and my wife does the lights, and
Oh,
she
that's awesome.
she's great because she knows I like Pink Floyd, and she gets the lights. She really just makes it work. And Zach, Lloyd's brother, Zach, is the sound engineer, and I actually trained him in when he was 17 years of age,
That's
and
cool.
he's just gone on a different level to what I could ever do live. He's just an amazing, great live sound engineer, and he's just got a very cool head and never gets panicky or anything like that. So he always get the sound the way I like it. So it's we have a great team, and
Yeah.
just too bad that my dad wasn't there, as I said, to partake, because he used to always walk around the venues and have a listen. He'd come back to the sound engineer. It's a little bit unclear over in the left hand corner, but the last thing he did was actually in China, and that was we did this big festival in China, and it was again, it was raining there as well, and there's a picture of my dad standing in the rain with a big smile on his face. So I have so many great memories with my dad and great memories with the band, and as long as we can continue to do it and everybody's having fun, I really, I kind of happy to do it. Traveling is always tough, but at the end of the day, it's always worth it. At the end of the day, when you get back and the experiences that you had, meeting different people, and just the experience of playing on stage in front of people is always makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, that's cool. What does touring look like for you guys? I know you
So
got a few dates in November.
November 9th in the 229 Club in London. I don't know what part of London it's in, but that's that. But we have a ton of dates that are going to be announced on September 6th, which will encompass Australia and a few different places. The United States, not just yet. US is always complicated because of the visa process and the
Yeah,
costings for us to get over. All I can say is we'll definitely make it over one more time before we hang it up. That's all I can say. But
that's great.
I always love playing the States, and I've got great memories of playing over there in San Francisco and Seattle and all the different places. But you never know. We're going to do our best to get everywhere that we can. And but we know this time there is going to be New Zealand, there's going to be Australia, there's going to be probably not next year, but the year after, South America as well. So we're going to be looking at that. And apart from that, a flood of European dates to go next year.
So awesome. So
Yeah.
awesome to bring your music to the fans like that. And we got this wonderful record. Embers comes out September 6th, Napalm Records. Torsten, thank you so much for sharing so much. And it was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And it's a special band. We love you guys, and we appreciate everything you do. There's so many people that depend on your music. Uh, Thank you for making it.
Much appreciated. And I just want to say to all anybody that supported us over years, without you guys, we wouldn't be here. We do realize how lucky and fortunate that we are to be able to do what we love to do. There's so many amazing musicians, amazing writers that just don't have been unlucky, because some people that say the cream rises to the top. It's not true. There's so much more involved. The luck is financial, making sure people have enough money. For example, my father did a lot, financed this a long time for us to get where we got. So you do need a bit of luck on your side. And all I'm saying for anybody that's doing music out there, just believe in yourself and do what you can, and who knows what can happen. But you also got to have a fallback plan if things don't work out too. That can be a daunting thought all in itself. But all I can say is if we play other places, we always like to put on local groups and let them play on the bill with us, because that's important, I think.
Fantastic. Such a special band. Thank you so much. Torsten, I hope to talk to you again.
Likewise, thanks so much for the
All right.
interview.
You
Bye.
got it. Thank you. Bye
Bye.
bye.